All right, so we are done with the first draft. Let's revise this. With my first draft, I know a lot of people disagree, but in all of my years, I learned that I would prefer to have the first draft be 80 to 90% of the way there. To catch these big things like changing the thesis that we did a little earlier. If our argument is going that way, if our support, if our quotes and arguments are going that way, to tweak the thesis, I like to get that first draft knocked out 8 to 9% of the way there, and then I like to just do some revisions, and that's why it's helpful to not only be able to potentially either write down or have in mind the hooks, so how you're going to connect the threads. And I think there were some essays where I literally wrote the whole transition sentence down between each paragraph before I wrote, and then the outline and all that stuff, the thesis and the supporting evidence and the quotes and all that. But and then there were others where I didn't. But I think chronology, when it's chronological order, I normally don't feel like I need to, because you can always say later or later on in the poem. You don't want to do that every time. It's very weak, and it's not shrewd. But once in a while, I think it's acceptable. So let's see if we can't pick some things apart and make some edits here. So, then here I talk about wars of all eras, because Nixon obviously was around during a different time than Walt Whitman. Civil Wars. So line breaks, word choice, and personification. So I was thinking about use of word choice, but I think putting word choice in the middle, it fits better, because this is more plural. It just flows better. Line breaks, word choice, and personification. We do talk about line breaks early, but it still fits. Here's a positive, the comma, offsetting. This first poem relays the speaker's jubilance when seeing people team up in order to fight in the U.S. Civil War that took place between 1861 and 1865. This will chronicle Whitman's use of different literary devices, and we'll go through the poem's lines in chronological order. Okay. The speaker seems to excitedly exclaim that these people leapt. That these people? That the... I'll say townspeople. And we don't actually... Yeah. Let's call them community members, because they're part of a community. Not really townspeople, because Manhattan's a big city. It's not really a town. It's not like we're talking about some tiny little town. And then it implies community, right? Houses, workshops, doorways. It implies community. Community members leapt. That has Manhattanites arming themselves, also by introducing shared spaces that themselves share line 24 before we introduce to the people who actually move through the first line 25. The speaker further about the same village's expression to a minor role in this poem. Don't matter in this narrative. This is a note that we're driving this home. Instead, the speaker implies that individuals don't matter in this narrative. So we're sort of like circling the wagons, making some points, but then here we're driving it home. Individuals don't matter in this narrative. Rather, what matters is the notion of community, and the word choices in lines 24 to 25 reflect that notion. I don't like using this or that. But once in a blue moon, like once in an entire essay, I don't think it's going to have a negative effect. But if you do a really good job, and make some really good points, and if you have a couple little things that the teacher might not agree with you on, they're usually not going to. I just don't want to repeat notion over and over again. We could say that thought, that sentiment, belief. You could say said notion, or the aforesaid notion. Lastly, with regards to these two lines, action is emphasized since the word leapt comes before the word they, which further underscores the speaker's focus on war's ability to bring people together as a team, but also to help people actively devote themselves to a non-selfish collective cause. They leapt. Later in lines 27 to 28, the speaker lists multiple occupations of Manhattanites, describing cities dancing around the wire and arming themselves. The speaker starts with the young men and then moves to the mechanics and the lawyer and the judge and then the driver. What's telling about these lines is that the people depicted are unnamed and not described thoroughly. Rather, they are showcased in generic terms such as their demographic, young, or their occupation, lawyer, etc. The speaker's word choice here, again, we point towards our thesis, right? Word choice, line breaks. Again, emphasizes the collective over the personal, and then generic reference to people in a group over the unique individual, further supporting the idea that war brings people together for a common goal. The speaker depicts more people of various occupations in line 34, 35. This has been leaving the store. In Manhattan's workers depart from their respective workplaces for the same line. Clear with the word all. As all of these people from different places employed, not only sure it's on line 34, but they also have the word leaving is on its own line as it's granted a line break. The Manhattan multitudes described here essentially leave together, which further underscores the poem's focus on war's innate ability to bring people together and leave their peacetime social and work spaces to join up for a common goal. So we're saying this sort of the same stuff, but we're just using different verbiage. While myriad Manhattanites of various occupations collectively arm themselves to gear up, the war effort is portrayed in the poem's early lines. The speaker also goes on to emphasize that the connectedness among the townspeople spans generations as well. And we can use townspeople because we talked about Manhattanites. Okay, the new recruits. First, with regards to having war lessons passed on by Manhattan's elders. As the more experienced gents show the new recruits how to properly don their wartime garb accoutrements. Again, here the speaker's word choice illustrates an emphasis on war's ability to bring even different demographics together, with the old men helping the young men, and even young boys, to prepare Let's change this to the new recruits. It's always better if you can just literally drop in recruits. Or to drop in an actual quote. Right? Even boys. Helping the new recruits, even boys, prepare for their respective roles in this war, as the youth buckle the straps carefully. Again, the speaker elects the instead of their, referring to the buckled straps, which spotlights the poem's emphasis on the losing individuality and ownership. Let's just change this to de-emphasis. Right? It's a little bit simpler. It's like a double negative. You know what I mean? It just feels like a double negative. So it just feels like heavy. So de-emphasis on individuality and even private ownership in favor of the collectivist and community-forming aspects of war. Yes. In Whitman's poem, not only are multiple generations of Manhattanites inspired by the war to team up for a shared cause, but also mothers and sons are connected by the war, with the latter encouraged the cheering crowds to go out and fight and work toward accomplishing the collective goal of winning the war. We've said collective numerous times, so what's the group goal? The group's goal. Yeah, it's alliteration, a little bit of alliteration. Group's goal of winning the war. In lines 49, 51, lines 57, 58. Slack's running out. Again, the speaker music connectedness of Manhattan's master in this war effort is all the public servers with their flags from the doorways of their churches and other areas. Like going to war to fight an enemy and being a member of going out to play in a sports competition with an opponent. Alternatively, since there's such a community and unyielding support with regards to their word choice in these lines, the image of the crowd supporting the Union troops in the streets seems to be analogous. So is this alternatively? This is additionally. In addition. Right, because we're adding to the argument. We're adding to our thesis, to the argument that supports our thesis. This is a lot, but I'm painting a picture because I'm trying to create the analogy. I really want to paint a picture. Whitman does such an amazing job of painting these pictures. But what's happening in this poem? So I want to paint a specific picture of, yes, this does look like a Memorial Day parade. You know, favorites. And the excited environment, again, a little bit of alliteration, goes with it a sports match or a town parade. In addition to showcasing moms and their sons living to share a moment as younger head off to war, and their frenzied neighbors supporting that decision, the New York Times also relays more support for the war later on in the poem through word choice. Again, through word choice. In line 59, the speaker directly connects the actual weapons of war So you could say here, word choice and metaphor. By illuminating the cannons, as opposed to of their actual function, which is to destroy. Indeed, the use of unlimited and value uses double entendre here. To attach a gun. We're going back. It's ready for use. We can write the source, but for right now we're just editing. I mean the all the other stuff, you know, you can figure all that stuff out. This is the most important thing is the content of your paper, and then obviously, you know, whatever format you're using and all of that. If you're using different sources, bibliography, works cited. I mean, it's just. But a lot of times with this, since it's only one source, you're gonna have either footnotes or you're gonna reference. You're gonna place your references within the body of the essay. Your citations within the body of the essay. So this innocuous second meaning. The perfunctory first meaning. Again, shows the speaker's perfunctory meaning, like sort of just basic, literal, minimizing of the horrific bloodshed and death. Describe the poem, yet is not. Later still in line 60, the speaker depicts the words red business, which all the paces were effort in a clinical but not manner. Further understanding the atrocities were embraced families and soldiers on both sides. Not only does the speaker's word choice show a declared de-emphasis on the messy and violent bloodshed as a staple of all wars, but the speaker's word choice also later blatantly allies war with the advancement of civilization. Allies war. So allies war can be seen as a little bit confusing when you're reading it, because you're thinking like war allies, or allies, you know. So blatantly connects something with something else, yeah. Well, this connection between the notions of war and evolution is unequivocally in the poem. Nevertheless, the speaker does use a double entendre, emphasizes analysis as a possibility. Repeats the phrase arm races advancing twice in 4 lines, which emphasizes that phrase and perhaps the two at minimum meanings that the phrase conveys. Number 1, an armed group of people living forward in the streets in battle or getting ready to go to battle. And number 2, an armed group of people is metaphorically advancing in an evolutionary and improved manner. Either our human species, advancing, or at the very least, metaphorically advancing this group of people. The speaker's use of this double entendre, and evolution literally means improvement. You know, something's evolving, it's getting better. So that's what advancing. The speaker's use of double further stress to bring people together, and these people are here to welcome the battles that are presumably fought during the Civil War. Then throwing in little ingredients as we get near the end of the essay, dropping more specific. Finally, at the poem's close in line 74, lines 80 to 82, deploy specific word choices in line breaks to minimize the cardinals that oftentimes arouse for more instead of for a single selfless cause, and then drop the quote. Line 74 is blatant and lays bare the speaker's eager support for the war effort. It is deemed the work for giants. The word choice giants is quite superlative and moves into the poem's closing lines where the speaker uses personification when describing the city of Manhattan, even giving the words all your children a separate distinct line, further emphasizing the connectedness among the city and its people as well as its people in general. Let's change to inhabitants. The speaker concludes the poem by describing the city itself with a smile and joy as the city itself celebrates the fact that the city's masses are all teaming up, or at least supporting the war effort, which conclusively marks the poem's focus on war's ability to bring people together. Cause language or visual. Conversely, the speaker describes the city as covertly frowned on in peace and lenity, which essentially shows the speaker's belief that the city's true nature is war, and not peace, or that the city itself. So we don't want to argue that. We could argue that. That's definitely something that we could argue. We could have potentially argued this in the conclusion. But that's something new. It's not part of our thesis. All we're arguing is that the city itself is happier when its people are in war fighting rather than in peace. That's all we're arguing. Walt Whitman's drum taps for songs were played presents a speaker who seems to light at the prospect of Manhattan citizens going to war. At least when looking at the word choice, line breaks, and personification is evidence of the poem. Indeed, if the speaker is not positively elated at the notion of this New York City borough's citizens taking up arms and advancing to meet the coming enemy in battle, the poem, regardless, features a clear emphasis on the inability to war to bring community members from all walks of life, occupations, demographic, together in order to fight and support a single collective cause. That's reiterating the thesis. Hence, the speaker elects to focus on these more positive aspects of war rather than focusing on the more negative aspects. So then here we don't have to say of war, because we already said that. Such as the bloody violence, dismemberment of its armed accompanies the experience of war. Through the word choice, line breaks, and personification, so let's say through line breaks, these are granted myriad vivid images. That of soldiers. So let's say like those who search guaranteed to go to battle, like that of soldiers gearing up to go to battle, that of people cheering on these young recruits, and even that of flags waving in front of all the homes and offices that adorn Manhattan City streets. So let's say those, because they're those images, not just one image. Those. We had to throw in clarion call. Whitman's Civil War poem reads as a clarion call for Manhattanites to leap into the war efforts, and though I'm reading this as a pacifist, whether or not I'm a pacifist, I mean it still bears mentioning. I mean, what does that really mean? You know, it means no one's. What does that really mean? It means that someone never wants to fight, never wants to, never wants to go to war ever. So, as a pacifist, over 100 years, he almost made me want to strap on my buckles and boots and fight for old Manhattan. But it's still helpful, right, to mention pacifists because it's the other, right? And saying, though I'm reading this as a pacifist over 100 years later, and I could have said not only as a pacifist, but also over 100 years later. That's a little much. It doesn't quite flow off the tongue as well as saying as a pacifist over 100 years later. So there are two counterpoints here. He almost made me want to strap on my buckles and boots and fight for old Manhattan. It's very functional, this final paragraph. But and it's like right down the middle. We're not taking huge risks. We're essentially, we're not taking huge risks. We're not really. So let's just, we just erase all this. And now this, of course, the title is going to be on its own page, especially when you have something this long. We would definitely do the double spacing. So I would just go here and then double space this. So you can just go, and then format, paragraph, and then they have like spacing, and then you could go, line spacing is double, right? And then remember, this is going to be on its own page, and then that's going to be double, and then keep this single. Keep that single right there. And then let's see how long this is going to be. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go all the way up until, so I'm going to go to format, paragraph. And you could do 1.5 if it's a little long. Don't tell your teachers I said that. No, it doesn't matter. I'm sure that they understand. If you've got a really solid essay, and teachers normally don't mind if you write a little too much. They usually mind if you don't write enough. But yeah, you're not gonna pull one over on them. They're gonna know that it's 1.5 instead of 2. But I would rather do 1.5 than make the font smaller. That's a personal thing, because they got to read a lot of these essays, and you don't want to do like 8 font, even 10 font. I mean, you want to give them 12, maybe 11. I mean, if you've just gone overboard, and and you just have to include all those quotes and all those paragraphs, usually like you can erase a paragraph. You can literally just remove one of the quotes, and that saves you a lot of time. But you want to follow the instructions of your teacher. So yeah, so let's just see how this looks. We're double spacing the stuff now. That's still going to be single spaced. And see how this looks. All right. Let's see how this looks. Okay, looks like 7 to me. Okay, so minusing this, we don't have any issues with, breaking up the lines or whatever right here. Yeah, this is good. I think this is good setup. I like it. Kind of like it. All right, so 6.5 pages. So it's going to be 6.5 body pages plus an intro. That's it. Whitman's Wildness About War and Drum Taps, first O Songs for a Prelude. Hope you enjoyed this, these videos, and hope it helps. And until my next essay. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.